Teachers everywhere, welcome. I'm Ben. I have 4 million downloads on my online shop, Out the Box Science, and today I'm going to tell you how to create the best PowerPoint lesson. This lesson was just awarded top 10 resources on the test website for atomic structure. My first process that I go through is to think of 3 things. First 3 things are, what is the content you're actually going to teach? How can you make sure you're communicating that in the most clear way, and just the consistency of the resources that you are making. So in terms of content, we do AQA science at our school, and I use a website called Caboodle where I can get all my resources. So you can see on here, this is the lesson. I've got some learning objectives already given to me. I've got a structure of what we could teach. There's some example questions, and that's where I'm going to get my main body of content from and the ideas of what I'm going to be teaching. I also use the specification and just check that I'm ticking off everything that I need on there. The next thing I check for is just the clarity. When creating a PowerPoint, you don't want it to be overwhelming, so you want to make it the simplest you can in terms of the content, in terms of the pictures, in terms of how you're communicating. So that's the second thing. And the third is consistency. I have a certain style to my PowerPoints, and that means that every student, as soon as they walk into the room, they know that this is a lesson from me, Mr. Waite, and then they know what to expect. That just helps them to get on with the lesson in the way that they know they should. So let's load up one of my lessons, and my first start is the learning objectives. You need to think, where do you want this lesson to go? What is the number one things you want students to understand by the end of this lesson? And that's where it comes with the learning objectives. I've got learning objective at the very top, and I've got some learning outcomes there that are normally sequenced in going from simple to more complex ideas. So we've got some describe, you've got some defining in here. It's pretty straightforward lesson. The learning outcomes are pretty simple here. And then the keywords, I've looked at what that lesson entails, and I just select those keywords, put them in the space, and then I try to provide some enthusiasm for students, get them thinking in a different way. So I normally take a science quote or a science fact, and I import it into this slide and use Canva to create my graphics for this. Once I've got my learning outcome, I start with what is it that I want students to walk in and do. And typically it is a quiz. So I've given them 5 questions. I think 5 is a decent number. It's not too long, it's not too short. And I think of what they've done in the previous lesson, and I try to incorporate some retrieval practice in there. I give the option for teachers to go through it one by one with students, or just to have it all up on the board. So I just set it out as a sequential order of questions coming up. And once I've done that, I don't show my answers. I think that it's best if teachers go through that one by one, rather than just putting all of the answers up. And so teachers do that. I also provide an alternative, because in our department, some people like to do the quiz at the beginning, some people like to do a different task. And so it just gives options to those who are wanting to download these resources. And so I provide options there. So once I've got my start of the lesson, got my idea of where we want to go, let's dig in now to the content. And at this stage, I'm trying to think how best to communicate this information. What's the key idea? And they need to understand what an ion is. So I've got a picture up here of an atom and an ion, and I want them to see the difference. And rather than just saying to them what an ion is, I want them to be thinking about the difference between two. Might be the first exposure to ions, probably is, because it's year 9, year 10 topic. So I just want to let them see that difference, and we can use that as a springboard. I just leave it a bit vague here so the teacher can expand on it as they get responses from the students. But then we dig straight into what is the definition. It's good for them to know straight away. I'm going to give you the definition of an ion, and we can work around that. And rather than just having it all in one like overwhelming information, I've kind of spaced it out. I've got animations that bring up the information as the teacher goes through. I think animation is really important because it reduces the cognitive load of the students. I've also highlighted some keywords within that body of text, but I'm trying not to overwhelm my PowerPoint with so much text that the students are just going to be overwhelmed and uninterested. So we break it down. You can see that I've got graphics coming in, and I've got information of the main bullet points. And at this stage, it's up to the teacher how they want to do this, whether they want the students to take notes, and I don't give much guidance. It's up to the teacher to use, but hopefully from this PowerPoint they can see the general direction that we're going, and we're going in the direction of we need to know what ions do. So we give some examples now. It's really good to show students what it is an example of the ion of a particular element. So we go through a couple of examples, clearly laid out, not too overwhelming, information spaced out in a really clear way. And not just to give one example, but to give multiple examples for teachers to use and students to become aware of. And then heading into our first activity, taking that information, I never want to give them an activity that was not discussed in the lesson. And what I found when I was looking for PowerPoints online is that the information was completely detached from the activity that was given to them. And that was not helpful to teachers. So I want to really provide a task that's going to help the students because they've already been looking at that and it's not completely different. So there's an extension task on there for students who finish early, and that's the first part. My main principles is you want to be clear, you want to be consistent. They all know where the activity is going to be. It's clearly laid out, and that's consistent throughout the whole PowerPoint. And then we move into the next stage. Similar ideas, and I've put in a video in here. I think it's good to provide a variety of activities, so a video can be really useful as long as the teacher just doesn't watch the whole video without checking the understanding of students. It's good to break up that information, check their understanding, but provide a resource for teachers to use. And especially if you're a non-specialist, I've created these PowerPoints to help those teachers too, and having a video that can explain that is really useful. I like to give some examples laid out in alternate ways. So I could just have on this slide a complete body of text that says 1 meter and 1 centimeter equals da-da-da. But I think it's better if you've got graphics, you've got things spaced out in a creative way. And I just thought, oh, how best could I display this information? So I've put pictures, I've put information laid out in a way that's engaging to the eye for a student. I like to also relate things to real life. So here we've got a picture of the London O2, and I think it's the O2 anyway. And I like to just emphasize that information that we see in life can relate to real life, and getting them to see the difference. And atoms are very abstract. You can't see them. And just helping them to appreciate the size difference with a real life example is something that I really think is important. And so I put it in here with the PowerPoint. As you can see, the nucleus compared to the whole size of the atom, putting it in a graphic way really helps the students to take in that information. And then we head to another activity. We don't want the teacher to just constantly be talking throughout the lesson and then not having things that students can do. And I find that when I've planned lessons where there is regular time for students to take in that information and then apply it, the lessons go much better. And so I try not to give too much information before then the activity is given. And as you can see, there's not a ridiculous amount of slides before then the activity comes. Sometimes content is required and you need a lot more space, but in this topic it's good to just give it in short bursts. And then we're on to our final outcome. The teacher might not get to this point in the lesson, but it's good to put it in there, and they can always resume that in the next lesson. So again, trying to simplify the information, highlight that information. We want them to know that it's the same number of protons, so I've highlighted that, given contrasting examples so they can see visually what is the difference between an atom, visually what's the difference then of an isotope of that, giving a very clear definition that this is the key part of the lesson. So I'm just going to dedicate one particular slide to this, and then maybe a bit of graphics to help them see in a different way that it's a larger number of neutrons. And I'm using my graphics to do that. And then heading towards the end, again, another activity, and we wrap up with exam practice, which I think is really good to solidify that knowledge. And I just take questions from an AQA website, just modify to my own style, and then we review. So there you go. If you found any of this useful and you want access to this, just go to TESS website, Out the Box Science. You can get this resource, which was rated one of the top 10 resources on the TESS website, or any other free resources. I've got loads of free resources. Feel free to grab them, Out the Box Science, TESS. And any questions, add them in the comments below.